Hello, and welcome to another edition of History with Mr. Mink. And today, we're learning about the life of one of the most infamous people in American history, Benedict Arnold. Let's go! Benedict Arnold is probably most famous for being a traitor during the Revolutionary War, switching sides and fighting for the British. But let's find out more about the man behind arguably the most famous treason in American history.
Benedict Arnold? Yeah, how about that? Traitor.
Benedict Arnold was born on January 14, 1741 in Norwich, Connecticut, in his childhood home. His great-grandfather, Benedict Arnold, was the first governor of Rhode Island, and his great-grandfather was one of the founders of Rhode Island. By the time Benedict was born, his family was very well established in the New England area. How established? Fun fact, Benedict Arnold's genealogy can be traced back to 4 United States presidents: Ulysses S. Grant, Franklin D. Roosevelt, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush. Benedict had 5 brothers and sisters growing up. Sadly, only him and his sister lived to adulthood, with the rest dying young of yellow fever. This caused his father to fall into alcoholism, and their fortune slowly faded away. At the age of 16 in 1757, Arnold enlisted with the Connecticut militia and served during the French and Indian War for 13 days. Long story short, the French had already won the battle for Fort William Henry in New York, so his company just turned around and went home. Hey guys, if you want to just act like this never happened, maybe head to the house, eat some Scrapple. By the time Benedict was 18, both of his parents had died, leaving his sister as his only remaining immediate family. After some successful business moves, including selling his family house, Benedict bought 3 trading ships with a partner. This began his lucrative career as a merchant throughout the colonies, as well as from Canada all the way to the West Indies. British tax acts eventually caused Arnold to join the Sons of Liberty, a secret group that opposed unfair tax by the British. High taxes and large debt forced Arnold into smuggling goods, which was illegal at the time. There's even a record of Arnold and his crew beating up a guy who threatened to let the British know he was smuggling goods. Fun fact, Benedict Arnold was known for a quick temper and actually fought in multiple duels. According to Google, a duel is a contest with deadly weapons arranged between 2 people in order to settle a point of honor. One such duel took place in Honduras because a guy told Arnold he didn't have good manners. Seriously, if your response to someone telling you don't have good manners is to challenge them to a gun battle, maybe it's time for some self-reflection. When the Revolutionary War broke out, Arnold was elected a captain in the Connecticut militia in 1775. Within 2 months, he was promoted to colonel following a successful plan to capture Fort Ticonderoga. Over the next 5 years, he was an important piece of the colonial war effort. In fact, one of the first American naval fleets was built by Benedict Arnold. In 1776, the Americans learned of a British fleet on Lake Champlain headed for New York City. Arnold, being a former sea trader, gathered shipbuilders and carpenters to makeshift a fleet of 15 boats to take the British on. The Americans got whooped. Bad. The 25 British ships destroyed almost every American ship. This did delay the British long enough that they had to change plans and find shelter for winter, though. Some historians believe this battle early in the war may have saved the Revolution. Arnold became a general in 1777 and was even named the military governor of Philadelphia when the British withdrew from the city. Eventually, he was placed in charge of West Point. He was a hero of the revolutionary cause
and went on to be a foundational part of the early United States government.
Is how this story could have gone, but it didn't. In late September 1779, a British major named John Andre was captured by militiamen. Found in his boot were papers detailing the plan to turn over West Point, and evidence that General Benedict Arnold had betrayed the Americans. Arnold had given Andre passes to use in case he came across militia, and Andre failed to use them. Fun fact, West Point, also known as the United States Military Academy, was a key piece in Arnold's betrayal. It wasn't always called West Point, though. During the Revolutionary War, it was known as Fort Arnold. I'm telling you, old Benedict was legit. If he hadn't turned coat, there's a good chance West Point could still be called Fort Arnold today. So what happened? Why did Benedict Arnold betray the colonists and the cause he fought so hard for? Well, it's a combination of things. Number 1, money. He was in debt. Like my grandma Neil used to say about people who spent too much, Benedict Arnold had champagne taste and beer money. While in Philadelphia, he lived way outside his means. Part of his treason demands included the British paying him £20,000, which is around $26,500. That may not seem like much, but £20,000 in 1776 had the same amount of purchasing power as about $3.3 million in 2020, so it was a pretty solid chunk of change. It should be noted that the British actually paid him significantly less since his plot didn't work. This guy just couldn't catch a break. Speaking of breaks, joke break, where's Benedict Arnold's favorite place to get groceries? Trader Joe's.
Bazinga.
Number 2, pain. Many scholars believe a combination of physical and mental pain caused him to enter into a sort of midlife crisis. Between Benedict witnessing so many siblings die when he was young, an alcoholic father wasting away their fortune, along with losing his first wife during the war, I'm sure he was dealing with lots of unpacked trauma. The physical pain was a result of heroic actions in multiple battles. Arnold suffered injuries on his left leg at the Battle of Quebec, Ridgefield, and most notably Saratoga. By the time he got to Saratoga, he already had gout in that leg as well. His injury at Saratoga pretty much ended his battlefield fighting. Medics wanted to amputate, but Arnold refused, so they crudely set his leg to heal, leaving him with pain for the rest of his life, and a left leg that was 2 inches shorter than his right. It's said when a soldier asked after the battle where he'd been hit, Arnold replied, "My leg. I wish it had been my heart." The irony is, if the bullet had hit his heart, he would only be known as a great American hero. Number 3, he was ticked off at George Washington and the government overall. He felt disrespected. Throughout the war, multiple junior officers were promoted over Arnold. Others took credit for his bravery and tact in battles, and he even resigned from the Continental Army at one point in the war. After Saratoga, General Gates downplayed Arnold's heroism and took most of the credit for himself in the official reports. While in Philadelphia, he was also charged with 13 counts of misbehavior, stemming from plots to use the government's funds to increase his own wealth. I'm so glad politicians today have changed. Overall, he was fed up with how he'd been treated. He saw himself as a war hero and did not feel he was ever treated that way. This series of insults and slights had a profound impact on him. Number 4, Peggy Shippen. While living in Philadelphia, Arnold began courting Peggy Shippen, whose family were known Loyalist sympathizers. She was only 18, but her and Benedict eventually married in 1779. She was still in contact with numerous British allies. Many historians credit Shippen as the catalyst for Arnold's treason. It is said that she had incredible influence over him and slowly convinced him to turn. Once he made the decision, she was a key in passing information back and forth. The British spy Arnold worked with, John Andre, spent time in Philadelphia before the British left the city. While there, he courted a young girl named Peggy Shippen. It's not hard to connect the dots and see where Arnold got his contacts. They communicated secretly through methods like coded letters and invisible ink. Get this, Arnold learned that Andre had been caught the morning of September 24th, while he was waiting to have breakfast with George Washington. Awkward. He quickly escaped to the HMS Vulture, which he took to New York City, his treason complete. He wrote Washington from the ship, simply asking for Peggy to be allowed to join her family. Washington obliged, not knowing how involved she actually was with his plot. Washington tried to exchange John Andre for Arnold with the British, but they refused. Andre was then hanged on October 2nd, 1780. Washington plotted to kidnap Arnold in New York City using spies of his own. The plan almost worked, but Arnold received orders to lead a campaign in the southern colonies and left New York City the day colonial spies were set to take him. Washington really wanted to make an example out of him. Arnold truthfully didn't do much for the British after his treason. Arnold wrote a letter published on October 11th by the Royal Gazette in New York called "To the Inhabitants of America," in which he justified his actions. As you can imagine, it wasn't received well. Following his exposure as a traitor in 1780, locals in Norwich, Connecticut burned Arnold's childhood home, as well as dug up his father's corpse and threw it in a nearby river. He was a modern-day Judas, and his name was tarnished forever. After the war, he moved to England. He was not exactly welcomed there with open arms. Many detested him, while praising John Andre as a loyal hero. He was once again an outcast. After spending some time in Canada, he returned to England where he passed away on June 14, 1801, at the age of 60. His funeral contained no military honors. Even after death, Arnold failed to garner respect. Due to a clerical error, his remains were removed to an unmarked mass grave during church renovations a century later. Today, at the site of the Battle of Saratoga, there is a monument to an unnamed soldier known as the Boot Monument. Words on the monument read, "In memory of the most brilliant soldier of the Continental Army, who was desperately wounded on this spot, the sally port of Bourgognet's great western redoubt, 7th October, 1777, winning for his countrymen the decisive battle of the American Revolution, and for himself, the rank of Major General." Benedict Arnold's name is never mentioned. Benedict Arnold's story is more than a simple switch of sides. He is one of the most heroic and non-heroic people in American history. Is he a person who got what he deserves for betraying his country, or a hero who was taken advantage of one too many times? Or maybe he was just a greedy dude that was hard to get along with. That's the story of Benedict Arnold. Hero, traitor, or both. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button below and subscribe to my channel for more content. Thank you for watching.